Somber, evocative music begins and fades to a low hum. The story of the Vietnam War is not a simple tale of heroes and villains. It's a complex, tangled epic, etched in the emerald green jungles of Southeast Asia and in the hearts of millions. To truly understand it, we must journey back, not just to the first shots fired, but to a time when Vietnam was a jewel in the French colonial empire. For decades, the Vietnamese people yearned for independence, a dream that would ignite a firestorm. After World War II, a charismatic leader named Ho Chi Minh declared Vietnam's independence. But the French, eager to reclaim their former glory, refused to let go. This sparked the First Indochina War. The United States, caught in the grip of the Cold War, saw this not as a colonial struggle, but as a battleground against the spread of communism. They began to support the French, guided by the domino theory, the fear that if Vietnam fell to communism, all of Southeast Asia would follow. The pivotal moment came in 1950 for Dien Bien Phu. In a stunning victory, Vietnamese forces defeated the French, forcing them to the negotiating table. The Geneva Accords were signed, temporarily splitting Vietnam at the 17th parallel. Ho Chi Minh's communists controlled the north, while a Western-backed government was established in the south. The plan was for a nationwide election to reunify the country in 2 years. But that election never happened. The US and the South Vietnamese government feared a victory for Ho Chi Minh, and the temporary divide hardened into a fortified border, setting the stage for a new, even more brutal conflict. The government in South Vietnam, led by Ngo Dinh Diem, was plagued by corruption and instability. It struggled to win the loyalty of its own people, many of whom were drawn to the nationalist promises of the North. In response, a powerful insurgency rose in the south, a Viet Cong. Supported by North Vietnam, they waged a relentless guerrilla war, melting into the jungles and villages, striking at government forces and disappearing like ghosts. As the situation in the south deteriorated, American involvement deepened. It began with a few hundred military advisors, but the numbers steadily grew under President John F. Kennedy. The official goal was to help the South Vietnamese army defend itself. But the line between advising and fighting became increasingly blurred. The American public was largely unaware of the escalating commitment, viewing Vietnam as a distant and minor issue. Then came the Gulf of Tonkin incident in August 1964. Reports, later found to be confusing and controversial, claimed North Vietnamese torpedo boats had launched unprovoked attacks on U.S. destroyers. This was the moment President Lyndon B. Johnson needed. He went before Congress, which swiftly passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, granting him broad authority to use military force in Vietnam without a formal declaration of war. The floodgates opened. The first official U.S. combat troops landed in Da Nang in March 1965. What was once a small advisory mission had now become America's war. The American strategy was one of attrition. General William Westmoreland believed that by using overwhelming firepower through massive bombing campaigns like Operation Rolling Thunder and large-scale search and destroy missions, they could inflict so many casualties that the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong would simply lose the will to fight. The body count became the measure of success. The jungles of Vietnam were subjected to a deluge of bombs and chemical defoliants like Agent Orange, which scarred the land and its people for generations. But the enemy wasn't like any America had faced before. They were fighting on their home turf, for a cause they believed in deeply. They were masters of guerrilla warfare, utilizing intricate tunnel systems like those at Co Chi, and employing booby traps and ambushes with deadly effect. The Ho Chi Minh Trail, a sophisticated network of paths winding through Laos and Cambodia, became a lifeline, funneling troops and supplies from the north to the south. Despite relentless American bombing, for American soldiers, the war was a disorienting nightmare. They fought an elusive enemy in a brutal climate, where a peaceful-looking village one moment could become a deadly battlefield the next. The psychological toll was immense, a constant struggle against fear, frustration, and the ambiguity of their mission. Back home, Vietnam became the living room war. For the first time, journalists and cameras had unprecedented access to the front lines. Nightly news broadcasts brought the raw and censored reality of combat into American homes. The official narrative from Washington, one of steady progress and impending victory, began to clash sharply with the grim images people saw on their televisions. A credibility gap opened, and public doubt grew into a powerful anti-war movement. Students, civil rights leaders, and ordinary citizens took to the streets in massive protests, demanding an end to the conflict. The nation became bitterly divided between hawks who supported the war and doves who opposed it. The turning point was the Tet Offensive in January 1968. In a coordinated surprise attack, North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces struck targets across South Vietnam, even breaching the walls of the U.S. Embassy in Saigon. Militarily, the offensive was a failure for the Communists. They suffered devastating losses and failed to hold any territory. But psychologically, it was a catastrophic blow to the United States. It shattered the illusion that the war was being won. The attack proved the enemy was far from defeated and could strike anywhere, anytime. Prominent news anchor Walter Cronkite, a trusted voice in America, famously declared the war a stalemate. Public support plummeted, and a deeply shaken President Johnson announced he would not seek re-election. Richard Nixon won the presidency in 1968 on a promise of peace with honor. His strategy was Vietnamization, gradually withdrawing U.S. troops while building up the South Vietnamese army to fight on its own. Yet, at the same time, Nixon secretly expanded the war, authorizing bombing campaigns in neighboring Cambodia to destroy enemy supply lines. This secret war led to widespread outrage when it was finally revealed, further fueling the anti-war movement and culminating in tragic events like the Kent State shootings, where National Guardsmen killed for student protesters. Years of painstaking negotiations in Paris finally led to a breakthrough. In January 1973, the Paris Peace Accords were signed. The agreement called for a complete withdrawal of U.S. troops in exchange for a ceasefire and the return of American prisoners of war. By March 29, 1973, the last American combat soldiers had left Vietnam. For America, the war was over. But for the Vietnamese, the fighting had not stopped. The ceasefire quickly collapsed. Without the might of American air power, the South Vietnamese army was no match for the determined and well-supplied North. In the spring of 1975, the North Vietnamese launched their final, decisive offensive. The South's defenses crumbled with shocking speed. The world watched in disbelief as chaos engulfed Saigon. Desperate helicopter evacuations from the roof of the American embassy became the final, iconic image of the war, symbol of a superpower's humbling defeat. On April 30, 1975, North Vietnamese tanks rolled through the gates of the presidential palace. Saigon was renamed Ho Chi Minh City, and after 30 long years of conflict, Vietnam was finally reunified under communist rule. The legacy of the Vietnam War is profound and enduring. Over 58,000 Americans lost their lives. For the Vietnamese, the cost was staggering. Millions of soldiers and civilians perished. The war left deep scars on the American psyche, eroding trust in the government and changing the way the nation viewed foreign intervention. Veterans returned home not to parades, but to a divided country, often facing public indifference or outright hostility, while carrying the invisible wounds of their experience. Today, Vietnam is a unified, peaceful nation that has miraculously rebuilt from the ashes of war. The United States and Vietnam have normalized relations, becoming unlikely partners. But the ghosts of the war remain. They linger in the memories of those who lived it, in the unexploded ordnance still hidden in the soil, and in the lessons about the limits of power and the human cost of conflict, lessons we must never forget. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing and liking the video. It helps us continue to explore these important moments in history. We'll see you next time.